Hi, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Dave Breuer, Commander, 18th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about ocean safety. In particular, how we can use a handful of free apps to plan out your time in the ocean and how you can use those apps to increase your safety and mitigate the risks that come along with spending time in the water. Just a quick overview. I want to stress this is not an all-inclusive training. Far from it. There's no substitute for experience. There's no substitute for proper training. This is only intended to be a brief overview to expose people to some handy apps that can help you plan. That being said, planning can make a world of difference, and knowing a little bit about the place you're going, knowing a little bit about the locations, times, tides, winds, waves, all that can make the difference between living and dying in some circumstances. So I hope that people can enjoy this and use it to enjoy the ocean, but enjoy the ocean safely. Talk a little bit about planning and location, entries, exits, times, winds, waves, wildlife, tides, and boat traffic. And then talk about a couple apps that are free, and I frankly recommend highly. There's a lot of good information that you can get out of those apps. Okay, at this time, I'm going to open up my cell phone and make a recording going through these applications so that we can go through them together and kind of point out how you can use them to better plan your day at the beach. First and foremost, I think Google Maps is a great place to start. You can open up Google Maps and there's some really good pictures that can show in some detail the layout of these different beaches. I'm going to zoom in on Ona Peninsula, Mermaid's Grotto area, because I think it can help illustrate some key points. I'll go into it in some depth on the next slide, but for now I just wanted to show you the detail that you can pull up on these different locations. I'll go back to that one in a minute. The second app I wanted to talk about briefly is Kadena Connect. And this is a free app. It's got a whole lot of information about all kinds of things on the base. But for right now, I wanted to show you how to get to the weather section of it. From the main page, go to Home, click on the Home button, and then go to Current Conditions. Click on the Home button and then go to Current Conditions. Go to See T-Core Weather Conditions. And here we have a link to a whole bunch of different things that can help you stay safe. 5-day forecast, T-Core conditions, and a whole bunch of weather links. Also handy is just the regular weather app that comes with your iPhone. It has some good things, can give you rather good general information on it. One of my favorite apps is Windy, and there's a whole lot of versatility into this app. I'll show you how I use it, but that's simply that is just a general overview. On the macro scale, you can zoom way out and see big weather patterns across the globe, and you can kind of see how weather patterns are forming around. And like from the way that those are forming, you can have an educated guess on how they're going to go. Just looking right now, you can skim forward in time and see how the weather's expected to look in the future. These predictions, they're still weather predictions, but they can be pretty good. And so they can give you a pretty decent idea of how the weather's going to look in the future. I'm often looking to see, like, what is the weather going to look like this weekend? What's it expected to look like during the times when I want to be in the water? And if it doesn't look safe, I'm just not going to go. Now to zoom in a little bit, let's look and see specifically what we can find just looking at this weekend. Here's the Ona Peninsula. We look at Saturday. Saturday morning looks pretty calm. Looks like the winds pick up a little bit in the evening. Some pretty decent winds blowing offshore. You can note how the wind direction changes as the time changes, and that's something to be aware of before you get in the water. Also important is like on the lower right hand side of your screen here, you can click on the three bars and it'll give you access to a whole lot more information. I'm always looking at the waves. I want to see how do the waves look when I want to get in the water. Let's take a look specifically at Ona. I'm showing the waves. I click on a specific spot and it'll give me, you can look at a whole week's forecast for the waves. I'm going to look specifically at Saturday and Sunday. Okay. I usually call a knock it off point at 3 feet, but you can see looking at the bottom here, 2 feet with a period of 8 seconds, it doesn't look so bad. Okay, even like looking at both Saturday and Sunday here, it doesn't look, nothing here looks too awful bad. I think 2 feet is pretty safe. Further, when you look at the direction that these waves are going, they're going offshore, and that means it's likely to be quite calm on that side. Just to give a counterexample, if I look on the other side of the island, we can see how big the waves are there. Quite a bit bigger. 4 feet on that side because they've had the energy to build up all across the ocean. For me, 4 feet on most entrances, like I'd rather wait for it to be 3 feet and below. Magic Seaweed is another app. It's made for surfers, but you can get a lot of good information from it. I often like to use it to see how the tides are shaping up, and is one more point of reference for how the waves are. So I'll look at view all tides. I'll look and see how the weekend's shaping up. And I see what time my high tide is, what time my low tide. So on Saturday, I see that high tide's going to be 9:27 in the morning. I see low tide's going to be 16:37. And I see that the tidal shift isn't that great. A lot of times, a big tidal shift can mean that there's a big tidal current. A lot of these beaches, you can kind of think of them as being a big bathtub. And if the tidal shift is great, there's a whole lot of water coming in and a whole lot of water coming out. And that can make for dangerous conditions, as well as cloudy conditions. Oftentimes, the lesser the tidal shift, the lesser tidal current there's likely to be, and oftentimes the clearer the water because there'll be less sediment drifting in and out of those bay areas. And then the last one I wanted to talk about briefly, this isn't really an app so much as a website, but the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. This can give you some pretty good information. Right now, there's no big typhoons on the horizon. If there were, it would show up here. What we can do is check out this exercise just to see what it would look like. I'll take a look at the Typhoon Center warning graphic. This is just an exercise as if one was coming to Hawaii, but you can see where the typhoon is expected to be and how strong it's expected to be at different times. Always given in Zulu so as to make it clear across the world. So the graphic can tell you an awful lot, as can this little predictor. It can show you how strong it's forecasted to be at what time, and then also the closest point of approach to key areas, as well as what time it's supposed to pass that closest point of approach. So Joint Typhoon Warning Center, great place to have bookmarked for safety here. On the planning side, I'll just talk briefly location, entries, and exits. Always scout your beach. Know exactly where you can get in, know exactly where you can get out at multiple points, and recognize that the beach is going to be a different place at different times and different tides. The same beach may look drastically different when there's 6 more feet of water there. You need to know where it's going to be safe to get out before you ever think about getting in. I'll give some examples specifically with Mermaid Grotto in a second. Times, appreciate when does the sun come up, when does the sun go down, when does the high tide come in, when does the low tide go out. You got to appreciate the difference in conditions from different times. Winds can change. That windy app is a great place to look. Appreciate if the wind is blowing you offshore, make sure that it's not blowing so hard that it's going to be hard to swim against it coming back in. Also appreciate what the winds may do to the waves. And look at the wave forecast. Big waves by themselves may not necessarily be a deal breaker or may not necessarily pose a great safety threat, depending upon which way they're coming from. If those waves are coming into shore directly, they're probably going to be kind of dangerous at that site. If they're coming at a different angle, like going away from shore, they're probably going to lose their energy on the other side of the island. Or if you're in the wave shadow of some formation, that may make a big difference and make certain places still safe to dive if it's wavy in other places. Wildlife, know the wildlife there. I always wear a full suit with full skin protection to avoid stings from jellyfish. Be aware of big fish, sharks, but jellyfish are probably the single greatest danger out here. Know the tides. The tides can create their own currents. The tides can sweep you out. The tides can be drastically different at different times in different phases of the moon. Do your research before going in. I will never get in the ocean at a new place if the tide's going out and there's a big tidal shift. I will always wait until the tide's coming in or there's a very low tidal shift. And then boat traffic. Sometimes it may be the last thing you think about it, but it can still be very dangerous, especially if you're surfacing or if you are free diving or diving and you're underwater. That is why it's so important to have a safety buoy, a safety sausage. And that is why it's so important to have buddies and make sure you scout your dive to make sure you're not putting yourself in danger from boat traffic going back and forth. Okay, now I'm going to open up and do another recording to show just an example of how I would look at a dive for a specific location. I'll use Ona as an example, partly because it's quite popular and people always seem to get in trouble there, and partly because I know it quite well. So opening up Google Maps to look once more at the Ona Peninsula. So you can kind of see it drops off, and I know this from experience, rather spectacularly after the coral shelf. It's hard to see from this picture, but from the shore, it drops off and it forms something of a basin until you get to this. This is a ridge and it's hard to see, but this kind of going along the middle of the screen here, this area forms a basin, and you can think of it like a bathtub. Specifically at Ona and many places that are shaped like it, there's drainage points that appear as cracks on Google Earth. So you can think of this whole big area as one big bathtub, and this whole big bathtub fills up and drains, depending upon the conditions, through these cracks. This big crack, I have it marked with a star so I remember it. It will, as the tide goes out, it will be like a river carrying you away from shore as the tide goes out. Waves will come and crest and fall over this lip of the basin, and they'll drain out through these big cracks. And that drainage will feel like a river going out. As the tide comes in, this will be like a river pushing you back into shore as the water height from offshore increases and pushes water back in. At high tide, you might get some pretty big waves that aren't broken up back here. They'll carry their energy all the way into this rocky and frankly dangerous shoreline. At low tide, those waves are likely to break out here on the lip of this basin and therefore be quite a bit safer. So before I ever get in the water, I'll see where is it safe to get in and out and think about how that beach is going to be different at different times of day. Here at Ona, I know from experience, even at low tide, I can make it back in and out through this channel. Although I also know that if the tide's going out, it may be very hard to swim against it the way it's going. I also know from experience, at low tide, I may not be able to get back over the lip of the basin. It may be so low that I can't safely get back over it because the coral would scrape me. This is especially dangerous if the waves are breaking over that lip, and it could roll you dangerously up against the coral. Okay, enough on location. Times we already talked about, make sure you appreciate it. Let's look at this in some detail with the winds from Windy. So looking at this weekend, you can often see winds are likely to be a little bit calmer during the morning, but you can zoom out and kind of see sometimes the weather front has a wall. So looking like right here, Sunday night going into Monday morning, you can see this weather formation has a bit of a wall. And like below it, around it, there's some heavy weather. You can use that to kind of predict, but also see it as a warning. Looking very specifically during Sunday, there's a little bit of wind coming offshore. Yeah, okay, 12 knot wind coming offshore. I want to be aware of that, but that by itself isn't a deal breaker for me. I want to be aware of how the wind's changing throughout the day. And you can see it makes quite a big difference from Sunday morning, blowing straight to the west here. By Sunday evening, it's blowing up into the northeast, a rather drastic difference, and important to realize how that changes throughout your dive time. Let's go back and look at waves in some more detail. So I'm going to look at Saturday, look at Sunday. Okay. I see that the waves, they're not looking to be that big, so that's good in general. I can survive waves of 2 feet, it's no big deal. However, it's good to note. The period, the mark at the bottom of the screen here, that shows how long in seconds it is from crest to crest. A shorter period means the chop comes faster, and that can make it tougher to navigate. A longer period may mean that they'll break bigger, but it also means that there's less time when you're out there, or that there's more time to relax in between the crests. So always be aware of those waves. I do want to note, even if the waves are kind of big, if they're coming offshore, there's still going to be some places that are probably fairly safe. Like Gorilla Chop up here, it's always rather sheltered, and so it's often going to be rather safe even if every place else is choppy. Another place up by Cape Hedo, which I love and is spectacular but can be dangerous. Look up at Cape Hedo. The waves hitting like in the Cape will often be fairly large. That's probably looking at Saturday. Oof. Yeah, 5 foot waves is bigger than my comfort zone there. However, on the far side, right in here, even big waves like will be sheltered, and this will be in the wave shadow. So it's important to know where the waves are likely breaking. I would always double check though if that wave direction changes during the time you're in, and even given the prediction, know your escape routes, know where you can get out safely if conditions change drastically. We already talked briefly about wildlife and tides. Let's look at the tides. So I'm going to leave windy, bring up magic seaweed, looking again at Saturday and Sunday. These aren't huge differences, but it's important to note there's going to be an extra 2 to 3 feet of water at high tide and less 2 or 3 feet water at low tide. That can make a difference for what is covered and what represents a safe entrance and exit. Going back to look at Google Maps, specifically at Ona, that 3 feet may make the difference between being able to safely swim over the top of any part of this coral lip or needing to go through one of these gaps to cross that lip, needing to have a deeper chasm to come back in. That can make a very big difference. Also appreciate that there may be boat traffic out here going back and forth. Yeah, you're always going to be safer with a buddy. If you're scuba diving, you're always going to be safer with a safety sausage. So at this point, I'm going to close down my recording and close. That's just an overview, just exposing you to some of the applications that I think are most useful in planning my dives, planning my time on the ocean. But always remember, enjoy the ocean, but respect the ocean. Every single year, USFJ loses some servicemen to ocean fatalities. Please be very careful. Don't want it to be any of us. There's always a risk around water. Please plan well to mitigate those risks. I want everybody to get out there and enjoy the ocean, but to do everything you reasonably can to be safe and to mitigate those risks. And lastly, get out there and have fun. Don't be afraid of it per se, but respect it. Do your homework, research it, and take some solid steps to mitigate those risks. All right, thank you everybody. God bless you, and I'll see you out there. Take care. Bye.